Today, I have one of the wilder stories from my past dating experience. And before anybody starts commenting or freaking out that I'm trying to make women look bad, I know both men and women do this, so don't freak out. This is just a story from my previous experience and how it all played out in my situation. And to preface this, I'm not engaged, I'm not married, and I'm not in a relationship. And the woman that I was talking to in this scenario that I went on a date with, she didn't tell me she was engaged, married, or even in a relationship. So this is how all the events unfolded when I unknowingly went on a date with somebody else's fiance. So first things first, where did I meet her at? Just like the start of any great relationship, I met her on Bumble. And since I met her on Bumble, you already know this story is off to a terrible start. But once we actually matched, I scrolled all the way down to her profile and just, looked through her entire profile. One of the last pictures that she had was a picture of her at a restaurant, and I remember she had her hand on her face. And there was a huge ring in that picture. And I know women will go out, they'll buy rings, and they'll wear them on their hands, casually, right? But this was a legit ring, huge diamond, huge band. I said, this has to be a wedding ring. So I asked her about it in the chat. I said, "Are you currently in a relationship? It looks like it." And then she said, "Oh, that's just an old picture. You don't need to worry about that. I don't have anything more current to update it with, but that relationship never went anywhere, and I'm not in a current relationship." Once she said something along those lines, I said, "Cool, as long as she's not in a relationship, I'm fine with that." On her Bumble profile, it says she doesn't have kids, so that's good. That's one of my check boxes that I look for. So to me, I didn't really care if she was like divorced or if she was previously engaged or anything like that. As long as she's not in a relationship, that's good. So the conversation is flowing. We're talking about all the typical stuff like what do you do for work? What are your interests? That kind of stuff. The conversation's going really well. We exchange numbers later on in the Bumble chat, continue the conversation over text. And then I get the courage to ask her out on a date. I said, we have so many things in common. We should grab dinner sometime after work. So now this sets us up for the actual first date of how this went down. So this was earlier in 2025. It was an after work date just to grab some dinner. And we met around 6 or 7 in the evening. I had to throw the 6-7 meme in there. But really though, we met in the evening, getting back to the story, 6 o'clock, very normal, just after work hours. We went out to a restaurant. It wasn't nothing too fancy. It was like $10, $15 a person, really depending what you ordered. Like think of like Chipotle, but an actual like sit down restaurant where it's somewhat nice, but not too nice where, if the vibes weren't right on the first date, I wouldn't feel bad. But we hit it off really well. That dinner lasted about like an hour and a half. We were chatting the entire time, no dead air. It was great. We had a lot of interests, and, I definitely wanted to see her again. And the date kept going on, which like that's how you're having a good date. When she was like, there's a bar right next door. Do you want to just grab drinks and continue talking? Like, of course. So ended dinner, walked over to the bar next door and just had drinks and kept talking, right? And for a first date, like I've probably spent 4 hours, 5 hours in total with her at this point, like just literally sitting at that bar, just drinking and talking to her. So at this point, it's like 4 dates in one, just how much time I've already spent with her. And, let me know if I'm weird for this, but I feel like as a guy, like within the first couple of dates, you just get that feeling like you want this relationship to sprout into something more meaningful. I really like this girl, right? So after spending 5 hours with her at this point, we're pretty much getting ready to be done with this bar. She insists to come back to my place. And, at that point, I'm like beating my chest. I'm looking at myself in the mirror, giving myself a pep talk. So I was like, all right, cool. She wants to come back. Let's go head out. We head back to my place, continue the conversation there, drink a little bit more wine. And, it's great. Like I enjoyed spending time with her. She enjoyed spending time with me. But later on in the night, that's when she just dropped it on me that, she's still engaged. She really likes spending time with me. But she was thinking about ending her engagement. So if I was essentially like the rebound or the backup, we could make it a formal relationship once she actually talks to her fiance and just ends it officially, calls off the engagement. This is all wild to me. Like, first off, I just got my time wasted. She just straight up lied to me all the way from the Bumble chat, like once we actually started this conversation off. And now she's trying to insist that I'm pretty much the rebound, like just wait for her on the sidelines to, continue this relationship, continue taking her out. Once she actually calls off the engagement, ends her engagement officially with her fiance, like, no, I'm not just going to wait on the sidelines. And then she's telling me we can hang out if her fiance is like at work, if he's traveling for work, because he traveled apparently sometimes for like business trips. And then he traveled during the wintertime for like a hunting trip with the boys. I was like, dude, I can't believe she's talking to me like this right now. Like, this is the most wildest chick I've ever interacted with, took out on a date. But, outside of all of this, it's like, I'm pissed, right? I'm like heated right now. So I'm not going to freaking try to entertain in a relationship with her while she's trying to exit one and exit an engagement at that. So anyway, I was just like, look, I think you should go home. Just trying to erase this like from my entire memory. Like, this day has never happened. It was one of the crazier stories. I feel like I've seen these kind of posts on Reddit where, people will make posts about this kind of stuff, but it actually happened to me in real life. So I guess, those Reddit posts are real. It's like, man, I can't believe it actually happened to me. So after this, I definitely had to take some time off from the apps. It was just an interesting one that I thought I would never get myself into. And, if you're dating either as a guy or a woman, I hope you never have to run into this situation. It was a weird one for me to deal with and even process what was going on at that moment. But to close this video out, I would like to think that I have a pretty high moral compass. But just dating engaged people, that's something that I don't even want to entertain. And even though this is one of the crazier dating stories that I have, let me know if you want to hear more. I feel like I have a lot of first date stories that have not led to a second date, or things just fizzle out within the first couple of dates. I had a woman tell me that she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom on the very first date. That was her expectation, and she just laid it out on the table of, essentially if this became a relationship, we got married, this is what needs to happen. So that was very interesting. And I also had a woman just argue with me pretty much on the first date the entire time. Any little thing that she could think of, she wanted to get my opinion on it and just combat it. So I definitely have some stories. But the biggest takeaway from this video, anybody watching, if your date doesn't disclose that they are actually in a relationship, or even if they're just dating somebody else, engaged to somebody else, or even married to somebody else, and they still want to go on a date with you, those are some garbage people. But it's 2026 now, new year. I hope everybody crushes their financial goals and their dating goals as well.